Hi, I'm Carolina, your podcast host and expert womb healer. Over the past 5 years, I've served over 500 women to remove physical blockages in their bodies. We achieve this with Reiki. I believe healing doesn't have to be done alone, nor should it be. You will hear stories of healing, methods to heal with, and guest speakers covering taboo topics you won't hear anywhere else. Let's continue this journey of womb healing together. Hi, I'm Carolina, your podcast host and Reiki master. Before we get started today, make sure you leave us a rating and review to support the podcast, and make sure you're subscribing so you don't miss a single episode. Today, we're talking about something super awesome with an amazing human, and we're talking about top tips you need to know about your period when trying to conceive with Rachel Dutton, the period whisperer. That's super cool. Rachel, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to talk about things with you because all things period we need to know about.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I'm really excited to talk to you about them.
So people call you the period whisperer.
Yes. So I help people with period problems and fertility problems. As you can probably guess from my accent, I'm based near London in the UK. I help people in my clinic, in person and online. So I help people using womb and fertility massage, which is great for getting more blood flow into the pelvic region and helping with a number of things that I can talk about with my lovely little womb model. And also reflexology, which is specific bodywork focused on the feet. And then online, I can teach people how to massage themselves. And also I do nutrition. I'm a yoga teacher, so I can give people yoga to help with their physical issues as well. And most importantly, after doing all that training 10 years ago or so now, I did the natural family planning teacher training because I noticed when I was speaking to people and talking about their periods that certain patterns were coming. So I went off and did that, and that's learning how to chart your cycle. It's a scientific method. I was assessed by 2 general practitioners, which is the UK equivalent of a family doctor. Required pass mark is 98%, so it's a tough set of exams and coursework to do. But what you do is you learn to interpret different things about the cycle to work out whether someone is fertile or not, which you can then use to help with fertility issues. But then when I was really digging into it, because I was seeing so many clients with different fertility and period-based issues, which are really the same things, it's the same system, you could see these trends coming through. So I was like, okay, period color, this is interesting. And I was like the first person I know of to write blogs on period colors. And a couple of months later, everyone else started writing almost the same thing. Yeah. And then length and flow of cycle and lots of different signs and symptoms were coming up with people with the same sort of diagnoses. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And you can make that sort of logical leap as to why those things happen with other symptoms for other underlying issues. So actually, you can save so much time just by learning what your period is saying and then go and get appropriate testing for that. Or sometimes it can be something that's helped with nutrition or sleep or getting more flow into the area. So
what
it is really empowering.
Period?
That is sign and symptom itself of various different things that we can talk about. So yeah, all those things are signs that something is going on. And rather than think, oh, I've got a heavy period, I've got period pain, I've got these weird clots, or I don't have a period, my body's broken, it's not working, it's not fair. You can then be empowered and turn that on its head and say, actually, all these signs and symptoms is my body trying to communicate to me. It's a dashboard, and I just have to learn to speak the language it's telling me, and you can take that control back. And that's a very freeing thing to come to terms with.
I'm super intrigued with the womb massage. Different countries, different regulations and certifications. Yes. So to do womb massage, what type of certification do you need to get?
So you need to start off with the basic Swedish massage qualification in whatever country you're in, and then some will allow you with the reflexology qualification as well. And then the specific postgraduate training I did was Fertility and Womb Massage Therapy, which is based in the UK. She also has training courses around the world. There are other very similar massages, similar in terms of they cover the same parts of the body and have a similar goal and outcome, as in they're working on the reproductive system and a bit on the digestive system as well. But they've got different names and different techniques, and they look very different. But if you're in a different part of the world, you know, you've got to go with what's there. There's Arvigo, there's Maizen. Some people just learn something and call it like abdominal massage or tummy rubs, basically. But you get pelvic massages, but they're all external massages of the belly and the pelvic area, not internal. That's very different. And I also work on the lower spine as well, because whenever you go for a back rub, everyone's focused on the upper spine, but actually all the nerves coming through the lower spine, through the sacrum, and coming off the coccyx are what feed into the pelvic organs. And if, for example, you've bashed your lower back or bottom because you fell over as a child, or you were horse riding, so you have lots of sort of impact as you're going along, that can just cause slight, tiny issues with the innervation of the nerves. And it's not enough to be medically diagnosed or anything like that, but it's enough that it may be causing issues with being able to orgasm, for example, which a lot of people don't consider important, but it really is. So my first case study, actually, the first thing she said was, "Oh my goodness, I had an orgasm last night," but the day after I'd worked on her lower spine. So
let's throw a party.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's throw a party.
She didn't think it was possible.
Oh my gosh. Well, oh my gosh. Not only are you helping people restore their periods, but you're also helping them restore their marriages.
Exactly.
I just did a quick Google because I'm super curious. There is one place in New York that does womb massage, it looks like, in person. But
yes,
the other articles I found, of course, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the middle of Nebraska. So we're in the heartland of the United States. So like our largest city, which I live in, is like 1 million people. So maybe larger metros on the East Coast or West Coast have womb massage. I'm going to have to look now because there's articles on how to do womb massage on yourself and the benefits of it, but not like a service provider. I'm so excited to learn more. So our top tips, let's dive in, are: when are you fertile? When are you not fertile? And what fluids are important? So let's do the first one. When are you fertile? How do we tell?
Right. Whisper. So actually the fluids bit is important for that. So
perfect. Let's do it all together.
Yeah. We count the start of the cycle when we're charting is the first day of your period, because it's the first sign and symptom that most people can spot easily and recognize. And it is the sign that the previous cycle has ended because your progesterone and estrogen crashed, and the lowering of progesterone means that the womb lining is releasing. So the cycle is starting again, even though you're bleeding, with your brain sending the signals of GnRH to pituitary, and that's telling the ovaries to start picking things up again. So we have our period. During that time, unless you have a really short cycle, so less than 26 days, you're usually not fertile. Okay, then you have your follicular phase, which is what people say eggs, but it's the follicles inside the ovary. They're being stimulated to grow. They are producing a type of estrogen called estradiol, and that causes the womb lining to proliferate, as in grow. And also they start stimulating the cervix to produce cervical fluid. And there are several different types. So you may notice you've had your period, you have a few dry days, and then you might get even dry, flaky cervical fluid that's sort of white or yellowish. And then you start getting a bit of creamy cervical fluid, and then it starts getting more liquidy until eventually, around ovulation, you have a lot of clear, stretchy cervical fluid that you can stretch between your fingers. So it's increasing, and then suddenly it cuts off, and that's usually at 24 hours after ovulation. And then you have a long dry period, and that's your luteal phase. So your lead up to ovulation, so you're definitely fertile when you see your cervical fluid, as long as it's not in cervical fluid caused by other things, which we'll get to. And right through that to a day or two after your cervical fluid has finished. So we add on a bit of time afterwards, just in case people are trying not to conceive, just to give the buffer period, because some people do double ovulate and that only happens in a very narrow window. So because the hormones have changed, so you've got like a 24-hour window from ovulation to potentially the other side ovulating as well. So if you've got cervical fluid, we assume fertile. It can be, if you've got a very short cervical fluid window, that some time before that as well, that you're also fertile. But what I really like about the cervical fluid technique is it's telling you, usually with like 4 or 5 days in advance, that your body is trying to ovulate. And you compare that to like an ovulation predictor kit, which gives you 12 hours. Whereas if you've got your cervical fluid there, you know that that is going to keep the sperm in suspended animation. If you're trying to get pregnant, you've got a week, for up to a week, of getting sperm up there ready for when the egg is coming out, right? So rather than you've suddenly got 12 hours, you've got to get your partner home, both of you, even if you're not in the mood to try, because you've got such a narrow window. But actually, if you know when you have your cervical fluid, or even better, you know the start of your fertile window, because you've done the full sort of mapping process, you usually have 5 to 7 days to get it in there ready for when you ovulate. So you don't have that stress.
So what about the women who are not trying to conceive naturally,
right,
or they cannot? So do you try to help women as best as possible know their cycles for whatever purpose they want to first, primarily? And then like, what if like there is an ailment where they just can't conceive naturally? How does all of this work with that?
Okay, so that was a very rough overview. There's another sign that we use as well called temperature, which confirms that someone has ovulated. So we know that someone is fertile if they are ovulating regularly and they don't have any signs of other issues such as low progesterone or high estrogen in comparison to progesterone, by looking at the full length of the cycle. And also you do need cervical fluid to transport the sperm up there. So you can have infertile ovulations in that you're ovulating regularly, but you don't have any cervical fluid to transport the sperm up there. So when you're looking at cycle length, if you've got a really long phase between your period and when you ovulate, then that is a sign that your body is struggling to get there. So it might be you've got low estrogen, it might be you're inflamed, it might be you've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, it might be that you're underweight because you need fat and cholesterol to make sex hormones. It might be that you're overtraining. So it could be that you took up CrossFit and you're doing 3 hours a day. And again, your body is taking all those... Yes, your body is taking all those nutrients from that, from your reproductive cycle, to help build your body in other ways, because your reproductive system is the least important one that your body is going to go and look after. You need your bones, you need to be able to breathe, you need your cardiovascular health. Your body's going to prioritize all of those over you getting pregnant. So that could be stopping ovulation or preventing ovulation, or if you've got unstable blood sugars. And again, all these have their own signs and symptom profiles. And then after you've ovulated, it tends to be, if you've got these things, that your luteal phase, the window between ovulation and your period starting, ideally should be around 14 days. A lot of people can conceive with a 12-day window, some with as short as a 10-day window, but then you're really sort of getting on thin ice. But the shorter it is, the less progesterone you have to sustain that egg in the womb lining, because that progesterone is holding the womb lining in place. And it's also upregulating the thyroid to heat up the body and to heat up the metabolic rate to keep that egg with all the nutrition it needs, with the heat it needs, etc., to be able to divide cells until a placenta has grown. So if you've got low progesterone, that can cause issues as well. And even if you don't know any of this,
I do now.
Yeah. The color of your period and your flow rate. So if you have a heavy period, or it's really deep red color or purplish or even like blueberry colored, those are signs of estrogen dominance or low progesterone, which are technically two separate things, but I tend to heap them together because it's very similar. And someone who is on the other end of the spectrum, who is struggling to ovulate, or maybe doesn't have periods very often, so has extremely long cycles, they might just have like bits of spotting, they might have very light periods, it might be very light pink, even orange. So these are signs that maybe they're under eating, they don't have enough body fat, maybe something else is going on. So maybe they have a pituitary issue they need to see their doctor about, or maybe they're overtraining. So I've seen it a lot actually with other yoga teachers who, before they go off and do their 200-hour, which is the basic yoga teaching course, they will start really ramping up their training so that they've got the energy to do like 8 to 12 hours of yoga all day, every day, especially if they're going off to retreats in places like Bali, where you start at like 5 o'clock in the morning and then you do yoga every day for like 30 days. They are intense. And people say, oh, my period just disappeared. And I'm like, oh yeah, you've just like ramped up your physical activity and you're eating nothing but plants, because usually there's a requirement to eat plant-based whilst you're on these courses.
My reaction is, no shit, Sherlock. Like,
yeah.
I always remember when I was a kid at these interviews of the Olympic gymnasts, and of course I can't remember their names now, like, but they had stated that their periods disappeared because of the intense, like for years, they didn't have period because of all of their intense workout. So yeah.
And that's recognized now. It's called the female athlete triad, or red S syndrome. So it's something that their coaches should be aware of. If their periods have disappeared, then they're going to be at risk of bone issues, because you need ovulation for progesterone, and progesterone helps thicken and strengthen your bones. So if you're not cycling, for example, if you're on the pill, before you are at the age where you hit peak bone density, so for different bones in the body, it's in your 20s and 30s, you're not going to have the same bone density as someone who hasn't been on the pill. When you hit menopause, for example, and then things like you fall and break your hip, there isn't as much tissue there anyway, so you're more likely to actually have a break, and then you're more fragile when you're in hospital, which means it's a bit grim, but you're more at risk of death from pneumonia because your body has to put more resources into healing the fracture. So things like that early in life can actually impact your health and well-being late in life. And I'm not saying this to shame people who want to go on the pill for whatever reason. They have the absolute choice to do that, but they should be told when they're put on it that this is a risk, and then they can do things like more weight and resistance training to try and offset or mitigate that risk.
Well, part of this podcast is just to disrupt like the normalcy of what's happening in the United States and help women have better conversations with their doctor and feel empowered to do so. I feel I can speak from my experience is that I was never told any of the risks of any type of birth control I took. I was handed a pamphlet that includes the multiple IUDs I had. I had gotten a shot. Oh, I was told. It was that. I was told that I was at risk for depression, which happened.
And then they mentioned that.
Yes. And they did mention that, but like whenever I was on the pill, they're never mentioned anything. But
I was in a similar position. So in the UK, I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I was diagnosed when I was 10 or 11. I was quite young, and immediately they put me on the pill. Funnily enough, when they do that, you end up on the risk register, because anyone under the age of 13, they assume if you're on the pill, it's for other reasons. But they don't communicate the other risks to you. So I was like in my late 20s when I found out all these potential side effects. And by that point, I'd been on several different versions of the combined pill. I'd had an IUD, I'd had an implant in and removed. And I was on the mini pill because I was getting really bad migraines, and no one told me the migraines could be hormonal. Came off that, and I was like, oh, I've got my life back again. How interesting.
That seems to be a theme lately as a collective. I hear from different people from different parts of my life that are not connected in any way. Migraine seems to be much more common than it did before. So when are you fertile? So basically it depends on the length of your cycle in knowing those days. So also
there are some calculations you do as well as the signs. So you're like, you do need a qualified teacher to make sure that you're doing those calculations correctly. A lot of people try and learn from a book, and even a lot of books that are brilliant have inconsistencies between the calculations at the beginning and in the middle and at the end.
Gotcha. So fluids are always important because they tell us, they give us more of a sign, as you said.
Yes,
more of a
and
heads
you
up.
can get fluids that are a sign of fertility issues as well. So if you have lots of cervical fluid throughout the whole month and you never get a dry day, including during your luteal phase, that could be a sign of polycystic ovarian syndrome. It could be a sign of
Wow.
estrogen dominance, which is where you have excess estrogen in comparison to progesterone. And it can be a sign of thyroid issues as well. And you can even get spikes of cervical fluid if you've eaten something that's causing an inflammatory reaction. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's really amazing when you compare it with food diaries. You go, oh, I think you've got a sensitivity to dairy. Every time you have it, you have a temperature spike and a fluid spike.
So if a person wanted to start with knowing when they're fertile, not fertile, and then also knowing about their fluids, how would one who knew nothing start? Do you offer a course? What books should they read? How do we get started?
I offer a course, but you can look at books, but as I said, just be aware that a lot of them do have the disclaimer in them that their efficacy is quite low because one, you've got like perfect use versus how someone interprets it and tries to use it. I think it's always better with a qualified instructor. I've got many wonderful friends who are very talented at nutrition and other things related to periods who try teaching the method, and I've had to message them saying you've got the temperature ranges wrong, or you've converted it wrong, or you've got the formula wrong, and it does worry me that they still teach this. So I qualified natural family planning route. Despite what people say in the UK, it is not Catholic. It's secular, but it was created by Catholic doctors who were trying to find an alternative to birth control that was acceptable with religious beliefs. There's also fertility awareness, which it doesn't have as many rules. So natural family planning, you have one set of rules for each set of 3 months until you've hit the year, because it tries to give you the most infertile days as possible so that you don't have to worry about contraception as much. Whereas a lot of fertility awareness practitioners only teach up to the first 2 cycles, which is fine. It's more conservative. So someone who's qualified in either of those methods is, as long as it's a symptothermal method, is a good place to start. But before you do that, you can start now, I would say in an app, but we can talk about the controversies and issues with apps if you're in the US in particular. Because there's some legal issues around that now. But you can
pen and paper,
pen and paper. So start paying attention to what's going on around your vulva. So you have arousal fluids, which is when you're aroused, if you hadn't guessed. You can also have seminal fluid after you've had intercourse down there. You can also have, if you've got a vaginal infection, you can have fluid there as well. But being aware whether your vulva is moist or dry, and then making a note every time you go to the toilet of what's there. So if you grab some toilet roll, fold it so it's nice and flat, not got all the crinkles or everything to fall in, and wipe. Obviously, if it's itchy and dry, then there's no cervical fluid there. If you've got cervical fluid there, what is it like? Is it sort of dry? Is it lotiony? Has it got lumps in it? Is it clear? Is it cloudy? If you pick it up and stretch it, does it snap back or does it stretch really far? And you see lots of people trying to have these strict categories of fertile fluid as it's going through the phases. So they might say dry and flaky, lotiony, creamy, egg white, because it's like an egg white texture. A lot of people don't have that strict classification. It can be different. So some people can literally just have clear, but it's more stretchy as it goes along, or other people can have longer sort of dry and flaky days. So everyone's different. But after a while, you will start noticing your own pattern and what yours looks like and what's normal for you. And it might be that that pattern is also indicative of a hormonal issue or inflammatory issue or something else going on. And you can fix that and you will start seeing the changes, and then you will have a new normal. But the other great thing as well is if you know what normal looks like for you, then when you see something abnormal, like it suddenly smells funny, it looks different, you're getting it at a different time of the month, you can start thinking, okay, have I eaten something I'm sensitive to? Or do you have signs of a vaginal infection? Or you can see it and then go to your doctor and get it checked, and it actually turns out you've got abnormal cells on your cervix, but you've caught it at the really, really early stage. And if you do that, you can, obviously with doctor's okay and support. I do not recommend doing this all by yourself, but you can then go, okay, I've got really early stage abnormal cells. Rather than having the surgery to burn or scrape them off, you can instead do really, really intense self-help. So, do the breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, make sure you're getting your sleep, making sure you de-stress, really clearing up all the issues in your life, really eating nutrient-dense foods. And for some people, that's enough to really get their immune system back into the place it needs to be, and it'll fight off those cells, and you go back a few months later and it's all fine. So it can be really, really empowering. Again,
I am blown away. I'm just like stunned at like all of that.
Yeah.
So
I've had 2 clients that have done that. They had an open conversation with their doctors. They were like, look, it's super early stage. Can I just see if I can really turn my home life around? I've had a lot of stress recently. And because it's been at such an early stage, doctors have said, okay, but within 3 months, we're really highly going to recommend you have the LEAP procedure. And they've gone back and the cells have come back as fine.
Wow. So fluids tell us everything.
They are. It's amazing. And the worst thing is that it's shamed having cervical fluid. I remember the panty challenge. I wrote an article for the Huffington Post when that came out back in 2015, like people's complaining about discharge and that they shouldn't ever have discharge if they're a proper woman, blah, 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 which is ridiculous. And it's like, it tells you so much about your body.
Have you ever heard of yoni steaming?
Yes. I recommend that to people with obviously certain caveats, and I've got free instructions for it on my website.
I love that. We interviewed this beautiful human. Her name was Cassie Beard, and I can't wait for her episode to come out. And she owns I called it a salon, but I'm probably sure that's not the proper
yoni
term.
Steaming bar or something like that, or spa.
It is, and she serves tea there, and she offers virtual support, and she's like certified as a facilitator of yoni steaming or vaginal steaming. And I am just so in awe of like how many resources, but I didn't know about these resources or how important some of these things are until I started this season 2, or I started working on season 2. Like,
it's amazing.
It's super incredible. So for people who are going through IVF or are like, they know that perhaps maybe they know their quality of their eggs are not, they're not going to be able to use their eggs, or they're going to be doing IVF or something like that. How is their period still important? This is still important. How?
So it obviously depends what kind of IVF you're going through and whether it's IVF, IUI, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But if you are using your own eggs, you obviously want them to be the best quality you can get them. So if you've got a period that, we'll talk about all the green flags, right? What we want to see in our menstrual cycle. We want a 5 to 7 day long period. We want it to be a nice flow, not lots of spotting before or after, not lots of clots. So if you do have clots, 1 centimeter or less, fine. More than that, that's a sign of constriction issues in the pelvis. We want bright red blood, so not like deep purple or brown, no sludgy stuff, which is down to womb position, which we can talk about. We want our cycle to be roughly 28, 29 days, but between 26 and 35 is considered okay. You want your luteal phase, so from ovulation to your period, to be at least 12 days. But what you really want is the signs of a healthy cycle and the signs of good blood flow, so that hormones and nutrition can get to your ovaries, so that you've got the optimal ovarian health, and hopefully all those will be feeding into the eggs, or the follicles as we call them. So if you're using your own eggs, you want to make sure that you're getting as optimal a cycle as you can. And also, if you've got pain due to adhesions or restrictions in the space, we can talk about womb position shortly, you're not going to be getting the optimal blood flow that you need. So you need that, because you obviously need to get nutrients and hormones and all the things in the blood, oxygen, etc., and waste products taken away in order to get the healthiest possible egg you can before it's retrieved, if it's the type where they take them out, create the embryo and put it back in. Obviously, if you're using a donor egg, then you still want there to be good blood flow into the abdomen.
Blood flow.
You still want all the nutrients going into that because you want to be creating the best uterine environment for it to implant into that you possibly can.
I love that. You also need the womb, the uterus to be with good lining and all of that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
If you have got issues with egg quality and you are doing your best, please don't feel it's your fault. It doesn't mean just because with a lot of people, nutrition and massage and all this can help, that you've done something wrong, your body has failed. Sometimes it is just the way it works. Please don't ever think it's your fault.
That's so true. Okay, when we were planning our call, something you felt very important is that there is also a combined factor fertility is the sperm. It's not always a female problem.
Yes. So a third of fertility is a female issue. A third is a male issue. We're assuming a heterosexual couple here, obviously. And a third is a combined issue. So it could be that you're working fine. And you can tell that, again, with all the signs of your cycle being healthy. Then you go and get tested and there's nothing going on there. It could be that your partner has low sperm count or low sperm motility or poor sperm quality and health. So it might be that they're producing enough, but they're not swimming in the right direction, or they've got two heads or two tails, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So a third of it is the male. So if your partner isn't looking after his bits, again, a lot of the nutrition side actually
I love British humor.
Yeah,
his bits.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff in men's health is the same as what's in a prenatal fertility, which makes me laugh. But yeah, like zinc, for example, is good for egg health. It's good for sperm health as well. So that translates. Getting the good blood flow into the area is important, and obviously they have to make sure they're not boiling their bits as well, and dealing with stress and all the rest of it. And then the combined
and dying over here, boiling their bits.
Boiling their bits, yes. It sounds better than going into a hot tub and having testicle soup. So probably should have said that as you were taking it.
I have a little story. I interviewed this amazing human. Her name is Tessa, and she was doing all the things you were describing, charting and all of the things. And she also was going through her husband's health, and it turns out her husband, the sperm fluid was not like helping the sperm get to where it was going. So they used a device, a medical device called Fertile, which is like an in-home insemination. And basically she figured out from all of the data she had collected, and we'll go more into that'll be in her episode, but she had learned based upon the data she collected herself in, I guess, results, because she knows how to read test results and stuff like that, from test, paying attention to her husband and to herself, that she determined that it was her husband's sperm that needed help to get to the egg.
Yes. And
so, like,
that's a third of the issues that happen.
Yeah. And they were able to go on to conceive using that product, but it was only because she had taken months to gather data and really actually know, and then able to present this. Even when they present it to the doctor, that'll be covered in an episode. But I either get two types of clients. One's like, because I have mediumship abilities, tell me when I'm going to get pregnant and that's good enough. And I don't do that. Or two is, okay, I'm ready to heal. Help me on the emotional and spiritual side. And then I'm doing all the other things over here. But I think that, Reiki has just a small piece of, it could be a small piece of somebody's overall fertility pies, if they want it to be. But like this charting and knowing of your body just has like this not being done.
It gives you a window in.
This is not being talked about at all. Like, I mean, I feel like I need to bring you into the Fertility Foundation Collective, and I need you to teach this to all the ladies, because we've never talked about fluid. Is it stretchy? I don't know. So like, this is going to be such a life-changing episode to at least have people go and like buy a book or YouTube it or go to your website and learn more, because I guarantee you some of these things are going to be the first time somebody hears about this.
Yeah, as I said, it's amazing when you realize that we're really lucky we have that insight. Guys have to go and do a sperm test to get the same information. But the other third is combined issues, which is often the female having antibodies against the sperm. So often you can, it's very low chance, go back to using condoms to try and reduce that inflammatory response and do like a really low inflammation diet along with that, and then just hope when you try again that it'll work. That does happen occasionally, but if it's a combined issue, usually you do need to go down the IVF route because they have to filter out like the best sperm, best eggs, and you may even need to use a surrogate if your body's just not going to be able to take that egg through. And that's a lot more complicated to work through as well. But that's the other third, just so people are aware.
So how can people find you and work with you?
So I've got a website, periodwhisperer.com, so you can go there. I can teach people how to massage themselves if they can't find a practitioner. So it's just a really, really lovely belly rub. I don't have a straightforward package that people can just go in and like download it because it is changed depending on what your signs and symptoms are. And for some people, if you've got things like fibroids or implants, we have to avoid those areas or work them in a different way. So it is personalized for each person, depending on that. I do have a charting online, so like the first half, how to chart all your signs and symptoms and how to interpret them for health as an online course, which again is linked to on my website. So I don't do the full fertility bit teaching. I do that one-to-one with people via Zoom because obviously
there's so many variables.
There are so many things, and giving someone the wrong information, or if they calculate it wrong, if they're trying to conceive and they've got it wrong, that can be a bit devastating. And also if someone really does not want to conceive at all and their appetite for conception is zero and they've accidentally got that wrong, that could be life-changing in a different way. Yeah, I don't have that one as a download and watch version. That's a separate, we have to have a conversation and make sure that you understood how it's calculated.
Makes sense.
And the importance of really getting those signs charted properly so that you don't mess up the calculations.
I am so grateful for you being here. I'm so grateful that you took the time to share all of this with everyone. And I hope you have the very best day.
Thank you, and you. And thank you very much for having me.
It was an honor to connect and serve you this week. If you are a spiritually curious person wanting to conceive and heal blockages in your fertility, click the link in the episode description to learn more about the Fertility Foundation Collective. Until next time, my friend, know you are loved.